I grew up in the church. My parents were active in the Lutheran church. My grandfather was a Lutheran minister. And I was in high school, I was the Southern Ohio Lutheran youth representative, class president, sophomore, junior, or freshman, sophomore, junior year. And it wasn't because I was studious. It was because I told you about Jesus and learning about Jesus is because I really try to treat everybody the same. You know, it didn't matter whether you were in a band or if you were an athlete, or if you were kind of a loner. I really tried to just be cool to everybody. And that's kind of what Jesus was. He was cool to everybody, loved everybody. And then I got to college, and I was in biology, and I remember Mendel's law, I remember natural selection and evolution and Darwinism, and there came a moment where I was really struggling. I was like, the church doesn't want to embrace this science, and it just didn't make sense to me because science is God. You know, God is the scientist. And so I struggled with that and actually got to a point where I didn't even believe in miracles. I was hyper logic and reason, and I was surfing in south of Charleston, Folly Beach, and I was really far out, like where the water goes off, and there was a sand dune. I'm like, oh, that's how Jesus walked on water. And I did that with every miracle. And I finally was just like, yeah, I'm not sure how much of this is Santa Claus and how much like Christmas and how much of this is real. And so 20 years I was secular. I went from being in church and inviting people to go to church to I didn't go to church, didn't really feel comfortable there. Within a 20-year span, I may have gone 3 years. And in 2014, I had groups. I had compartmentalized my friends. I had friends in Tennessee that I golfed with. I had friends in, I had beer drinking buddies in Knoxville. I had workout people in Asheville. All these different groups. But the resonating theme of these groups was, you need to get into church. It just kept coming up. And I prayed a prayer. And this is a part of inviting the Spirit into your lives and into your congregation's lives, into your family's lives. I said, God, I believe in you. I said, but I struggle with the Bible. I feel like it was written by a bunch of crazy people. And I still believe parts of it. If it doesn't line up with the 10 Commandments and the life of Jesus, I'm probably questioning a little bit. And I said, Jesus, forgive me up front, but I can't wrap my head around the fact that you're the Son of God or that you're God. And I said, but I promise you both that I will get in church. And so in 2014, I started going to church, Methodist church. I grew up Lutheran. And I went to several churches, and I had a son at that time, and just couldn't find the place where I felt comfortable for my son. And ended up was invited to go right after I said this prayer. My neighbor came up and said, you should go to Central United Methodist Church downtown. And I was like, okay. And I didn't want to go to a big church, and I'm like, no, I'm probably not going to do that. And so I tried all these smaller churches, and I finally was not comfortable with the child care, and I ended up going to Central, and it was the first time my son had walked in to the nursery and didn't look around, didn't go back and start crying. He would always come back and look at me with those tears and crying, and just walked in. And I was like, I guess I'm at the place I'm supposed to be. And so 2 years later, I still didn't believe in miracles. I'd sit at the very back. I promised that I'd go to church. I'd sit in the very back. As soon as that last hymn was hitting, I was going to the nursery, picking up, holding, and moving on. And then in the summer of 2016, a man, Larry Watchern, who owns White Wolf Lodge, let me use his gravel parking lot for equipment because I had a project up in Beach Mountain. And at that same time, I bought a motorcycle, a Harley-Davidson Sportster, from a guy who was about to lose his car and wouldn't be able to get to work. And so, middle of the summer, And then August 15th of 2016 rolled around, and I had a project up in Beach Mountain that I had to go to. And so I went, picked up a survey in Newland, North Carolina, and then I made my way up, and I was like, I need to tell that guy Larry Watcher who owns White Wolf Lodge, thank you. And so I dropped off the survey at the codes department. I went and saw Larry. I found Larry, and I said, I want to write you a small check for helping me out. And he was like, well, I don't want any money. And we started talking about charities, and so I ended up writing it to a charity of his. And I shook his hand, and he asked me, can I walk you out to your car? And I'm like, okay, cool. And he said, can I share a story with you? And he told me 3 miracles. And the whole time he was telling me these miracles, in my mind, my logic and reason, I was trying to figure out how he thought it was a miracle, but it was just a coincidence. All these coincidences. And that's what I did. I shook his hand, I gave him a hug, and I told him thanks, and I got in my 4Runner, and I started driving down the backside of Beach Mountain. And I was jamming the music. I always jam to all types of music. And I'm like by myself jamming music, and I see a motorcycle and a guy parked out in a real estate office. And I'm about from here to whoever's in the back to a turn, and I heard, you need to pull in and talk to that man. And I started laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh. When I was in college a long time ago, I was pretty wild. I did some hallucination stuff that maybe you shouldn't do. Yeah, I dabbled in it, and I was thinking I'm having a flashback from 25 years ago. And so I'm laughing, and I keep driving. I get another quarter mile down the road, and I hear, JP, you need to turn around and go talk to that man. And I start laughing again. I'm like, my gosh, I'm losing my shit. And so I kept driving. I was in business, y'all. I mean, I was in business and successful at business as well. And so I laugh, and I get another quarter mile down the road, and I'm going through a sharp turn, and I feel a presence. I can't explain it. And I heard, no, you have to turn around right now. And I said, all right, God, this must be you. I'll turn around. And I'm laughing. I'm like, this guy's going to think I'm crazy. And so I turned around, and I'm driving back. I'm laughing. And the guy is on his motorcycle, and he's about to take off. And I honk my horn. I put my finger up, and I pull in front of him. And I get out, and I put my arms up to be disarming. I put my arms up to be disarming, and I'm still laughing. And I walk around the back of my 4Runner, and from here to Daniel's, about where we're at, and I'm like this, and I'm laughing. I said, listen, man, you're going to think I'm crazy, but God told me to pull in here and talk to you. And I'm smiling, and I look over at him, and he starts bawling, and like his shoulders were moving up and down, and I started crying. I wasn't upset, and I'm not upset now. These are tears of joy. And I start crying, and I go over and I put my arms around him, and he looks up at me with tears streaming down. He said, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. And I said, I didn't say anything. He said, my kid just went off to college. He said, my wife and I haven't been getting along very well. And just tears streaming down. He said, I was about to commit suicide. He said, I just thought God wasn't listening anymore. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, because I was logic and reason. I was like, this stuff doesn't happen. And so I'm holding it, and he points up to the front, the real estate office, and there's an old man looking at us. And he said, that's my father. He said, I drove 8 hours from Georgia to tell him goodbye for the last time. He said, I'm an engineer. He said, I plan everything out. He said, I have all my paperwork and everything ready. He said, I picked 2 turns on the Blue Ridge Mountain Parkway. He said, I'd calculated that I had to hit the turn at 60 to 70 miles an hour. There aren't guardrails, and it's miles down. And he said, you don't understand. I had butterflies in my stomach because I had committed that I was done. I share this story because I'm blessed just to be here and to believe. And also because the Holy Spirit is alive and well right now.